Hey everybody, welcome back to the news. I'm John, there's Josh, Dr. Mike is here, and Dave as well. Let's dive right into a lot of things to talk about. Very eclectic, is that the word? Eclectic list of things to talk about today. So we're going to start out with the Katowice Climate Conference. Katowice Climate, say that 5 times fast. Katowice Climate Conference just came to an end this week. We've been talking about it for a couple of weeks now, but it's over. And Dave, can we talk about results or achievements at this conference, or how can we talk about this going forward?
Well, Michal Kurtika certainly seemed to think a result had been achieved, jumping up on the table at the press conference like a fool. It reminded me of Tom Cruise on the Oprah show, made a show of Poland.
That's got to be some kind of break of protocol.
See what he did there. Yeah. But look, my big issue with this is they produced the usual nonsense, a roadmap, a non-binding agreement that all will provide
something like that.
Yeah, exactly. For me, the original problem goes back to Kyoto, and the argument was, do we use a cap and trade model, which is what we ended up with, which is the carbon credits, which is the buying and selling on the open market of carbon credits. So the idea is a producer who's producing a lot of emissions can buy carbon credits to offset his costs off a producer who produces less, and they're rewarded. But the huge issue with that is, how do you decide the rules strictly? How's it taxed? There's been massive swindles, well covered 10 years ago, multi-billion pound investigations into what's basically a VAT transfer scheme, which we're going to get to in Polish politics as well, I believe, this week. Yeah. But long story short, economists have been studying this since it started in 1997. It does not work. It's too complicated. There's too many ways of getting around it. There's too many jurisdictional issues. And that was what the big argument was going to be at this conference, was, can we sort out the rules and come up with a system that works? No, they can't. They haven't got a clue how to do it. Ergo, this is the disturbing thing about all of this. We talk about climate change and solutions and bringing change to the world, but we haven't a clue what the structure should be to achieve a positive result. The original idea at Kyoto of the economists had was to have a direct tax on carbon. Now, if you can agree that carbon's the problem, that's the simplest solution. I've never understood the carbon credit system, the market, how it works. It's ridiculous.
You said it's non-binding, and I think that's the key here. It's hard to escape the impression that this whole thing is political theater. The rich and powerful of the world come together to say, yeah, we care so much about the environment. We want to do something about it. We want to be seen to be doing something about it.
We need a roadmap.
And we need a roadmap, non-binding, of course. We don't want to tell anybody what to do. We just want to suggest things and let's get together and do it again in 2 or 3 years. So nothing ever really gets done, but it looks like they're doing something. It's perfect for the United Nations.
A lot of delegates make money off on the side, yeah.
Yeah, also. But, one of the things that, one of the energy areas is getting some attention, maybe because of the climate conference, is hydrogen. And Poland actually has some plans to be a major player in this hydrogen market if it kind of gets its feet and becomes a viable source, Dave.
Well, the thing about the hydrogen idea, it was all very vague, wasn't it? We'll build some huge refineries. We'll scale up hydrogen. People have been talking about this for a long time. It's certainly a viable fuel for long-range distances, like as an alternative to petrol, say. But Josh, look, I'm not great on the old science here. We have some issues with storage. Isn't it a very volatile gas, hydrogen? I mean, don't they make bombs out of that shit?
Well, yeah. I mean, that of course is a big part of it, and it is kind of like highly explosive. But actually, one of the things with hydrogen that makes it difficult to store is it is the smallest element. It is tiny, and it can very, very easily squeeze between the molecules of other elements or the atoms of other elements. So, like if you put hydrogen in a balloon, the balloon will go down relatively quickly because even helium, which is the next smallest element after hydrogen, escapes easily from balloons. If you've ever inflated a balloon with helium, and you'll see that within a short period of time it is like considerably less inflated.
Magic.
It is.
Can I just jump in as well? We talk about what are they achieving with these climate conferences? What is the point of them, basically? If I could jump on my hypothetical soapbox and give them an idea, it would be to decide on a realistic technology that all national governments could then invest in, and maybe also have an overall carbon tax contributing to a standardized technology. And I'd go for third generation nuclear, molten thorium salt reactors.
I second that motion.
That were proven to work back in the 50s and 60s in Oak Ridge, California. These guys guys, the science was done at the time. It's being done in China. It's being done in India. We talk about the coal plants they're building in that country. That's because people need power and they need it quick, and coal is simple and easy to build. But I guarantee you, these countries are stealing a march on the west while we look at our feet and argue about where we can put our next wind turbine. It's ridiculous. It's not always windy. We know that nuclear works. We just built all these missiles and pointed them at each other, and now we're bummed out about it. But, you know.
Hey, Dave, do you buy the conspiracy theory that says that the oil and gas and coal businesses are somehow strangling these efforts to revolutionize
the nuclear
energy
industry itself tries to strangle this
standing
technology.
in the way of progress? You don't believe that?
The business model of the nuclear industry was decided in a time of war. Cold water plants produce plutonium as an offshoot, so that was used for weapons, and the whole thing was a kind of virtuous loop for the US government. They sold the technology abroad, and all of a sudden, all of the plants we know as nuclear plants are cold water reactors, which creates steam, which is an uncontrollably vicious element to introduce into any metal-based building. You know,
basically they're using water to transfer the heat from the nuclear reaction to the turbines, and water has a bad habit of expanding extremely when it gets hot and then exploding into steam. You'd want to use something that's a little less volatile, like thorium and the salts. And of course, the fact is, like, the first researchers that developed these nuclear power plants, they were thinking of small-scale nuclear power plants they have on submarines. Mm-hmm. But then, like, they decided to let's scale it up to make it to power plants that can actually provide power to a whole city, which is like X amount times bigger. And all of a sudden, then you can't have just little steel balls holding it in like you have in a submarine. You have to have these huge complexes.
The famous containment chambers. Yeah. I mean, the big, ugly, oval-shaped domes that must be built around. And I never finished. Sorry, the nuclear industry make money from selling the rods. So your rods run out and you buy new ones off the provider. That's the business model of nuclear. This would totally disrupt that. So it's not just that oil and coal and gas industries don't want third-gen nuclear. The nuclear industry doesn't want it. So nobody's pushing for it. Politicians treat nuclear as it's nuclear waste. They don't want to touch it. They don't want to go near it.
Okay, last word on this subject. I'll make it a question for you guys. Does Poland have a place on the cutting edge of clean energy research, or is it hopelessly tied to the dark ages of coal?
They could if they wanted to.
I don't think that coal is a part of the dark ages anyway. If you have clean coal, if you have gasification of coal, you can really cut back on all the soot and all the particulate matter, which is the actual main pollutant in coal. Because CO2, you can also capture that, you can filter that, you can make up for it in other ways, but you can burn coal very quickly.
I would favour gas plants over the fabled clean coal, because the issue there is retransporting the carbon underground from the exhaust stack, and it's proven very, very difficult. They tried to implement this around the world. We've been promised the clean coal plant for a long time now. It's proven a lot trickier.
Let's leave energy behind us. Let's move on to crime and criminals, everybody's favourite subject, I think. Ooh. Crime and criminals. News from the Polish prosecutor this week that another VAT fraud ring has been busted. You see this quite a lot in Polish news, actually. Organized crime finds a way to exploit the Byzantine complicated rules of VAT reimbursement and whatnot, and from time to time they get caught. This group got caught for stealing at least 70 million zlotys, which actually in the big picture is
electronic goods, wasn't it?
Well, let's go to Mike for some of the details. How does this? What kind of fraud are we talking about? Is it not paying VAT or fraudulently getting refunds of VAT, or how does this work?
That's actually something a lot of people don't realize when it comes to this whole like VAT fraudulent tax thing going on in the last couple of years. When people talk about the government losing money on VAT, it's not that they're not getting tax money from people. It's the fact that they're giving back money to somebody who actually never had to spend in the first place. It's saying that you have a deduction that you're not deserving. You sell products between one company and another company, and there's differences in VAT rates between countries, between companies. And you say like, oh, I bought this product, now the government needs to give me back, 10%, 12%, 2%, whatever. But if you can fake the paperwork and there were actually no products bought or sold, you're just sending off the paperwork to the bureau in Warsaw, and they're like, oh, well, we owe you 2.5 million in taxes. Oh, okay, so you get that money. And it's even bigger when it happens between countries. Poland, for a while, was the biggest exporter of mobile phones in the world. They didn't produce any. They didn't buy any. They didn't sell any. It was all about just fake paperwork.
Because one makes me kind of proud.
Yeah, they would say they were buying in the Czech Republic and selling it to Germany, but there were no phones going anywhere. It was basically just paperwork. And since the VAT was a big scam, they could get the money back from the government. And this was tens of billions of zlotys of taxpayers' money that were being sent to these companies that were not actually producing or doing or selling or buying anything.
It was paper shuffling, basically, and hoping or kind of assuming that the government people are too lazy or stupid to notice what's going on.
Well, it's not even a matter of them being too lazy or too stupid. It's just there are hundreds of thousands, if not millions of transactions going on every day.
Them, yeah.
So if you just fake a little bit of paperwork here or there...
You have to imagine that at least part of that process is automated. The reimbursement process is automated. And I guess there are some algorithms that can detect suspicious activities, but they can't examine everything by hand.
Well, you're right about one thing, John. They can estimate very accurately how much VAT should be collected in an economy when you kind of take that macro look at it. Would you like to guess what the VAT gap is in the EU per year?
But is that the amount lost to fraud or something?
Exactly. The amount between what should be collected and what is collected.
Well, if this one particular case involves 70 million zlotys, it's got to be in the billions, tens of billions.
150 billion euro.
And this is not money that's not collected. This is money that all of us are given to these criminal organizations.
Well, the criminals only take about a third of this. The rest is kind of, not paid or transacted or just lost.
Get the feeling that there's a certain level where if the organized crime, if they weren't so greedy, if they kept it to a low boil, that they would never get caught. But when they try to get millions or tens of millions, the authorities have to review these things manually. If they just tried to get 10,000 euros, it'd be no problem.
To tie back to the carbon credits, that was one of the huge scams that was uncovered in 2009. Is billions of carbon credits were being bought in offshore VAT-free locations, sold in the UK VAT-inclusive prices, and then the company would just never pay the VAT and disappear. All the profit would be moved to a bank account.
And those are billions. And John, you're saying these companies, if they didn't get too greedy, it wouldn't be a problem. But no, they set up these institutions, several dozen companies, sometimes just in one country, sometimes in several, and they're just shuffling this all around for several years. And then they just dissolve these companies. And nobody ever knows. Nobody's the wiser.
It should be front and central in the EU's agenda, VAT fraud. It really should. It's a massive issue that doesn't get talked about enough because, this, unlike, say, harmonising corporate tax rates across the EU, which would definitely break up the EU and cause warfare, which is the last thing we need at the moment. VAT fraud is something we can all agree that should be clamped down upon, and it would be an easy, good win for the EU. They should adopt it as a central part of the agenda, which they won't, of course.
Everybody's having money stolen from them, but just because it's through bureaucracy and paperwork, they don't realize it. Nothing happens.
Let's move on to a story we've been following here for a couple of weeks, or actually a couple of months on the KrakCast, and there's a bit of an update, what sounds or what feels like maybe a final update, and that is the embarrassing, ridiculous, pathetic story of Wisła Kraków and their financial troubles. We've been talking for a while about how they're on the brink, and it looks like the end of this road is very, very near, and it looks like it's almost certainly going to lead to bankruptcy and a super embarrassing, demotion?
Yeah. No new billionaires on the scene then?
Relegation to the Polish fourth league. Okay, here's the situation. They say they're 24 million zlotys in debt. It's probably more than that. Over the last few weeks, a number of businessmen and organizations, both Polish and foreign, have come here to Krakow in person to meet with the administration of the club to go over the books. Every single one has walked away saying, no thanks. We can only guess as to what those books really look like when you can read the numbers up close. Last week, the chairwoman of the club, she had the brilliant idea of approaching the city and saying, "Look, why don't you take us over and we will sponsor you? We will promote the city. We'll have the Visit Krakow or something on our shirts or something like that." And the city said, after they finished laughing, they said, "Yeah, no thanks." And I think their investor of last resort, I forget his name, it's not important, he's the 55th richest guy in Poland, which sounds like kind of an insult, but he's the 55th richest guy. He was the most recent investor to come in and take a look at the books. He audited him and he said, "You got to be fucking kidding me. No way." And so they
spent how much on cheese?
They're at the end of their rope. They are at the end of their rope. No one's coming forward. Bills are coming due. You remember, the players haven't been paid since July or August. Oh, and this is an interesting bit I learned. And one of the stories I saw, their monthly wage bill, again, which they haven't paid since summer.
What did you say monthly twice?
1.3 million zlotys. Let's call that 250,000 pounds, right? A lot of money, but 250,000 pounds for the entire squad. How many guys on a full squad for the team? Do you know?
25.
25. Okay, so let's average 10,000 pounds apiece. So, compared to to the English league, to the Spanish league, it's not huge money, but you can pay the entire Wisła Krakow team for 250,000 pounds a month. Anyway, they don't have that money either. And they owe the city 123,000 for every home match they play. They don't have that either. But they came to a deal with the city. They said, okay, we're going to pay you from future television earnings. The money will go straight from Canal Plus to you, right? You'll get all the money, it'll cover the bills. Well, if they get relegated to the fourth league, which is mandatory, if they go bankrupt, that TV money disappears because they can't be on television.
Well, this is because if they don't pay your current debts, you can't be licensed to play in the extra classes.
They lose their license to play.
So the fourth tier is where that licensing requirement stops.
Isn't this what happened to Glasgow Rangers a few years ago? Bankruptcy in fourth league.
Yeah, but I don't think even with Glasgow Rangers it was quite so hysterically inept as.
It's pathetic.
It went on for a long, long time. Glasgow Rangers, souped the books up. They were paying.
I'm curious about something, David. Josh, you probably know something about this. Apparently, if the players don't get their salaries this month, they will be freed from their contracts, which will allow them to seek work elsewhere. Now, with the transfer window and the rules that govern kind of acquiring new players, do they have any realistic chance of getting on someplace else? If they're freed from their contracts?
Well, that's an interesting one because they could legally, they'd be like free agents, so they wouldn't be bound to the transfer window requirements, I don't think. But the clubs, of course, have their squads filled, they've got their own plans.
Exactly.
They're not expecting to be picking up players in this manner. You would expect possibly the agents would be working towards a start date a little later forward when the next transfer window opens. But it's a good question. Not
absolute
sure of the answer.
Mess, humiliating. And I think if you're not familiar with the club, this is kind of like, I don't know, pick a huge, familiar, successful brand name, and maybe Coca-Cola is a bit of a stretch, but Wisła Krakow, how far they've fallen and how quickly it's happened is just staggering.
It's a real shame. I mean, they're one of the great clubs of Polish football. I mean, they've won the title 13 times.
Not for much longer. Although the team is still playing, they're still top.
Yeah,
I think
they're
in the top. Are they 8?
Yeah.
Okay. So the how do you keep the morale going in the locker room? You haven't been paid in about 6 months, and you're almost certainly going to be out of a job soon.
It's a tough one, isn't it?
They're still playing.
Well, I don't want to get into all conspiracy theories here, but for me...
No, do it.
Wisła has always been all about the underground payments, the prostitution, the drugs, the gangs, everything like that. Wisła is just a cover for that, and the players are probably being paid in other ways. It's like, you're not getting any money here, but we got 2 redheads and a blonde for you tonight, a little marmalade sandwich going on,
Wild accusations from Mike.
Wow. You weren't kidding when you said you were going to get into conspiracy theories, right?
I had a feeling that'd be tasty when he set that up like that.
My God.
A marmalade sandwich sounds
A marmalade? That's a good one. I don't know about that, Mike. I agree with you that there is a dodgy aspect to the. Well, and to be fair, they're hardly the only club in Poland that has these.
No idea what that means, but
they're hardly the only club in Poland that has these dodgy associations. Let's say, and maybe that's part of the problem when these businessmen look at the books and they look at the debts and they look at all the other related, things that they have to contend with, and it's not surprising that they say, you know what, screw it. And one more thing, Dave, what do you think about this? You're a businessman. You walk into the Wisła office. If you let them go bankrupt and they're demoted to the fourth league, maybe you come back in 6 months and buy the club for a fraction of the price that they want today because they're in the fourth league. Does that make sense?
The price actually was a kind of like nominative 1 zloty anyway, because you were taking on all
We're taking on debts.
Yeah.
But if they declare bankruptcy, the debts are liquidated and they start over in the fourth league. Debt-free, presumably. I don't know how that works.
Here's the fact about football clubs dying, and the fact is, most of the time they're resurrected somehow. There's always a way back. How many clubs in the history of the English League have gone out of existence? It's just Wimbledon, really. All of them. Some of them have been horrendously damaged. There's, you could say that Rangers aren't really Rangers anymore, but guess what? They're back in the Premier League in Scotland, they're challenging again for the title. Steven Gerrard's their manager. That whole thing happened, 5 years ago?
Yeah.
Football is football. People love it, and Wisła Kraków, whatever you say about them, they have a brand. I mean, they're one of the most successful clubs in the history of Polish football, and I believe they will eventually rise again like a phoenix from the ashes.
Let me segue this into something else that popped up in the news this week. There was interesting statistics from Tauron, or Krakow Arena, were published this week. And
yeah, no free advertising, John.
Yeah.
You can pay us, Tauron.
Damn
it. Give us free electricity.
more than 150 events this year. Something like 600,000 people passed through there, and they turned a modest profit of like $1 million zlotys. And this is in their third or fourth year of existence now. And, when they built the arena, there were lots of people, and I was one of them, who were skeptical. They were building this huge arena, huge price tag, and, where were the events that were going to keep it kind of, active and self-funding? But it has worked out, and worked out very, very well.
Do you remember we took a tour of it?
We took a tour of it.
When it was empty.
It was totally empty. We got to sit in the top row. It was nice.
We got to be told what the seats were made of and everything. It was
plastic.
So interesting that tour was.
But Tauron Arena, it's interesting.
That was a fun day out, John.
Along with
that's planned for us.
Along with the arena in Łódź, what's it called? Atlas Arena. I think those are the only two arenas of that size and standard in the country.
It is a serious arena. I know an array of facts about it because I took an educational tour of the facility.
You weren't paying attention when we were. I think you were just wandering around the hallways.
How many people does it hold, the Tauron Arena?
18,000 something. Anyway, I mentioned this after the Wisła thing.
State-of-the-art soundproof.
I mentioned this after Wisła because how many times do you hear of an event at the Wisła Stadium besides a football match?
Yeah, it's an ugly cantilevered ground.
It's horrible.
It's not modern at all. It's Cracovia really did it right, didn't they? You know, and that's been a big problem for them. That comparative, all the expats, if they go and see football, they go to Cracovia. It's got nice little bars. The season tickets are reasonable. You've the facial ideas for getting into the ground. It seems to be. I've never been actually.
Last year,
I watched football on television exclusively.
They had a Red Hot Chili Peppers concert there. They had Andrea Bocelli concert there. In the winter, they make it into an ice skating rink. They have there's corporate events there. Wisła Stadium doesn't do any of this.
Did you go and see Bocelli? Did he move you?
No, I don't give it. I think he's horrible.
He's a door.
Not for me. But the point is, the Wisła Stadium is never used for non-football events, and there are plenty. How many summer concert festivals could be held there? How many other various things that come up? And it seems I don't know what hand the Wisła organization has in organizing these events, but they don't seem active in trying to recruit these events.
But
that would help to pay their bills.
You've answered your own question, John, because Krakow has so many good venues. Nobody needs Ulicia Raymonta.
Well, they have a bigger capacity than the Cracovia Stadium. Outdoor. I don't know, anything.
Okay, can we circle back to Tauron here?
Circle back. Oh, that was just a suggestion. You didn't have a point to make.
We thought you had some juicy rant.
We started.
I thought you had something back.
to say.
Mike's got something going on here.
Oh, he doesn't. Anyway, the Tauron Arena is a success, a great success apparently, and it seems like one of those situations where if you build it, they will come, because suddenly all these productions and touring concerts and different things are coming here that never came to Krakow before. I think we mentioned it on the KrakCast news before that prior to Tauron Arena, Krakow was a wasteland when it came to concerts and things like that.
And did you know that classical musicians helped to design the acoustic elements of the main chamber?
Oh, he remembers something from the tour now or something.
Really? But I can't believe that, because I've been to one concert at Tauron.
They say the sound is horrible.
And it sounds horrible. I saw the Foo Fighters there. I love that band. I've seen them live before, like in a freaking club in Hamburg.
If you love the Foo Fighters, I don't really think much of your judgment of sound, to be honest with you, Mike.
Okay, well, I'm going to interrupt on this point because I do...
What do you know about sound?
Take those headphones off and tell us.
Don't get too fucking technical here.
I'm not. But,
okay, go on.
I've heard kind of different reports about the sound in the Tauron Arena. There are people who said that the sound is absolutely dreadful, and I've also heard people say that the sound was absolutely superb. And it seems to me that the architectural and technical work that's been done is probably the best that you can do for a building of that size, which is always going to... There will naturally be problems in a space that big.
Just Dave Grohl threw a monkey wrench in with his shit music.
But, there are certainly... these days, kind of live sound equipment, PA systems, loudspeakers, etc., is very, very sophisticated, very, very high quality, and generally speaking, the engineers who are operating that, doing what they call the front-of-house sound for bands, are very, very skilled people. It's a very well-paid job, blah, 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 blah. But occasionally the wishes of the artist might override the kind of skill set of the engineer, in the sense of like, man, I got to have the bass, loud and big bass. Now,
let me just suggest something. You think Fleetwood Mac would do a lot better job than the Foo Fighters of utilising all this technology?
Yes. Well, actually, I mean, Paul
Maybe
McCartney.
now they got rid of Lindsey Buckingham.
Paul McCartney played in the Tauron Arena just over a week ago. Sound fantastic. What's the guy? The German Hans Zimmer, the film track guy. He did a concert there a year or two ago. And apparently the sound was absolutely dreadful. And it was because it was, especially if you were sitting at the back close to the wall, and those big bass notes, which Hans Zimmer's music features quite heavily, was way too loud, and it was actually physically uncomfortable.
Don't forget, Krakow Arena is a multi-purpose arena. It's not a dedicated venue for like the ice Congress. What do you call it? The ice?
Well, no, the point. Sorry, I was taking a long time there, but the point is that you could have as good a sound as is possible in an indoor space that big.
And you're not going to have a concert and make every person out of a crowd of 16,000 go home and rave about how great the sound was. And it's just impossible. So somebody's going to.
No, but when I wanted to go back to what I was going to complain about, when I said I love the Foo Fighters, I mean, I know what they sound like. I know what they're supposed to be like. Yeah. And that concert was horrible. It sounded bad, and the crowd was terrible. And everybody's just standing there staring forward. I tried to squeeze in to get in front of somebody. They were like, "Oh, where are you going?" I'm just going forward. Keep on going. I've been to so many concerts, mosh pits, screwing around. Everything's fine. Last time I saw Foo Fighters was in a club. It was crazy. I've been to concerts in Spodek and Katowice where I think it sounds great for our concerts, and the crowds have always been fantastic. Here, it was just like dead wood all around me, and it sounded bad.
If the Foo Fighters were playing in my back garden, I'd pull the curtains.
Let's move on to 5G. Not a rapper. It's talk about the network, people, the phone network.
Have you been working on that one all week?
No, it just popped into my head, actually.
That's why he's staring at a screen and a teleprompter right now.
Poland joining the 5G network game. Somebody's going to
instantly had a beef with Kanye.
I understand why this is a big deal. I know it's important, but somebody's going to have to explain the technical side of why it's a big deal.
Well, I put this link up for one good reason, because it said the words 5G, and I thought it sounded like something we can talk about. But now you point out, Dan, there isn't much you can say, really, is there? I mean, it's just, But
what's wrong with 4G?
Well, the big thing about 5G is that not only is it faster, the bandwidth is larger, but latency is the main issue about 5G. How fast it is between you press something on your screen and you get a reaction back. And 5G is supposed to be big when it comes to actually the Internet of Things, so appliances at home or cars. When you have a car that needs information about, like, say, when it comes to autonomous driving, like what the other car is doing, you don't want that information going to a server in the cloud being processed. It's slowed down by some network and it comes back. No, he wants to be able to communicate with that car in front of him as quickly as possible, know what he's doing. And 5G is all about the speeding up latency, so getting rid of latency.
Well, T-Mobile is introducing it now. I imagine the competitors in the Polish market will have to catch up and introduce their versions pretty soon. Mike, am I testing your knowledge if I ask if it's backwards compatible? Does a 4G device benefit from 5G?
Well, every new network basically is backwards compatible. Like, you had your 2G phones 10 years ago when 3G became a thing. You could still use that phone. It just couldn't take advantage of whatever was new. But when it comes to 5G, it's going to be less about phones. It's going to be more about actually devices and appliances, IoT and cars and everything.
It's about we got it first. Go Poland. Yeah.
It's T-Mobile. They're not Polish, but
one of the first places in the world to have a.
Oh, I bet you South Korea had this 50 years ago.
Well, 2 years ago, but still. But 5G is also
same thing.
The thing about 5G is that there's no actual definition of what is 5G. Some people say 5G is just it's faster. Some people say 5G is there's no latency or there's slow latency. Other people say 5G is about it has to be in this range of frequencies. It's not really decided yet.
Verizon have been pissing around with introducing it in the big cities in America, and they still haven't gotten it launched yet. So go Poland.
Well, America was famously slow to even pick up on mobile phones at all, wasn't it? I mean, when everybody in Britain was tooling around with a big fat Motorola in their pocket, Americans were still putting coins into payphones.
Look at the big rotary dial phones and asking the operator to connect us to New York 522 or something like that. Yeah?
I want to talk with the Swansons.
Dave, this is an interesting thing we were talking about.
I will decide what's interesting.
You already did. You told me this was interesting. I hope you still think so.
So then I'm sure it'll be fascinating.
The Polish Meteorological Office issued a warning because of the changing weather conditions this week. You get the combination of freezing rain and the black ice is the result. Freezing rain turns into black ice. So it basically means this is the time of the year when you're supposed to change into your winter tires. But Dave, you told me once that winter tires are not a thing in Ireland.
Well, no, and we don't get snow that often. You know, it might be 5 years and you won't see a drop. So winter takes us by surprise when it comes viciously and snowily, and the whole country grinds to a halt, much like Josh's home country too. Wouldn't you say, Joshua?
Yeah.
It's pretty chaotic in Ireland when it snows, pretty chaotic indeed. And let me tell you, around this time of the year, your Polish neighbour gets a hell of a lot of respect for something we can consider a kind of garage superpower. He whips out his winter tyres, changes them in front of you, clearly giving off his experience in snowy conditions that you lack, and everybody in the estate stands around going, Magic's got winter tyres. No messing with him.
Yeah, he knows his shit.
He knows his shit. He knows his snow.
They are serious
Snows
about
all the time in Poland.
It is a big deal here, Mike.
Well, like most people don't realize when it comes to snow tires, actually not snow tires, winter tires, it's not about ice and snow on the road. It's about the temperature change, because when the temperature changes, the properties of rubber on your tires also change. So you have your summer tires, which keep good grip when it's kind of warm or mild. Then you get winter tires, which keep their kind of like gummy, rubbery variables still going on.
Gummy, rubby, what? You don't sell tires, do you?
Yeah, I know all about rubbers.
Good science, Mike.
I was a med student in Krakow.
Okay, anyway, the point I think you were trying to make, I think, is that low temperatures affect the gripping power of tires, right? Is that okay? Can I say it that way?
This is why in Ireland we're honest enough to just shake our head in wonder at the Polish knowledge of tire science. You know, like we know you know this stuff, and we just sit there going, "My God, he's got that whole tire situation."
But generally, what I want to say is, like, even though there's no precipitation actually on the roadway,
he's going again. Here we go.
Winter tires can grip the roadway a lot better. So you want to switch when the temperature will be below 5 or 0 degrees Celsius.
No worse feeling than the ass end of your car catching up with you coming around the left-hand side. Yeah, horrible.
Oh, actually, yesterday I was driving my wife. Well, actually, she was driving, and we were taking our time. We were going very slowly. You know, there's ice and snow. It's fresh. Everybody's being careful. We see one of those buses with the umbilical kind of extension. I don't know what to call that. That's just jackknifed in front of us.
You mean a bendy bus?
Bendy bus, I think that's what you
jackknife, turned over.
No. It's when the back has come round to catch up the front, like with a.
Oh, that kind of. That's a jackknife.
Like
so we pass and I think it's a good thing that we're driving by ourselves and not actually jumping on public transportation. But when we're getting to the shopping center and there's like an off ramp, my wife is going maybe 20 kilometers an hour because she knows the conditions are bad, and we just start going sideways, drifting. The analog brakes go crazy. The problem was that this was a car with all-wheel drive and all-season tires, so the worst combination for snowy weather whatsoever. And
you need to have your gummy rubby adjusted, I think.
But I was protected because rubbers.
Ooh.
You keep doing that to me. I don't know how to pick up where you just keep doing that to me. Let's move on to something else. Actually, there was something happened this week under the radar for a lot of people, but it's actually a very, very, very big deal. And I'm kind of suddenly surprised why we didn't talk about it earlier in the show. But let's get to it. The Polish government survived a vote of no confidence, Dave.
Why don't you ask Mike? He's a political expert. Yes, they survived a vote of no confidence. I was perplexed by this, really. I didn't understand.
Who called for this vote?
This is PO, Grzegorz Schetyna.
Yeah. Was this just grandstanding? I mean, Schetyna needs to get his name in the news or something, because they'd no chance of passing it. I mean, they're not really damaging peace with this. It seemed like a strangely ineffective political.
It's like saying, here's a hammer, please hit me with it.
They're basically just wasting time and money doing this. When PO said they wanted to have a vote of no confidence, everybody knew what the result would be. It wouldn't make a difference. But they had a debate Friday late night. The government is saying, all the things is done great. And they're showing themselves to their fans, see, we've done everything great, and the opposition wants to get rid of us. And even though you had other parties actually stating, Cookies, they had their people out there saying we're wasting money and time on this debate means nothing, we should be talking about issues. That's not discussed in the media. You just have the peace politicians and PO politicians getting their sound bites and their screen time about how much the other party sucks, but nothing is actually concluded.
Is it fair to say, definition in political theatre, you know the outcome before you do it, and you do it just for the effect? Is
it fair to say, Mike, that part of peace's success right now is owed to the fact that PO is kind of suddenly reduced to this kind of pointless obstructionism?
Oh, no, I completely agree with that. It's like PO, basically, their only reason for existence is to target peace. And peace can be unified and strengthened by the fact that, like, we have this constant enemy that's attacking us for no apparent reason. They're helping each other. They're kind of like two little parasites that are sucking off of each other right now.
We'd like to issue an open invite to any prominent PO politician that wants to tell us what their alternate vision for Poland's future going forward is, what they'd like to see done, what their policies would like to be.
And why they didn't do it when they had the government for 8 years.
Yeah. A couple of other subjects to jump around to randomly, as we've been doing since the very top of the show, I think. Let's jump to the fact that public transport was free on Wednesday a few days ago. I was on the tram with my bike, and on the tram 52, it's designed to there are some bike slots, I guess. And for the first time, I was going to take my bike with me. I bought 2 tickets while waiting at the tram stop. I bought 2 tickets, one for me, one for my bike. And I get on, and there's a sticker covering the little validation ticket thing. Says free transport today, so I bought 2 tickets for nothing.
Yeah, but you can use them anytime.
I'll use them later, of course, but still, I was mad at myself.
If you don't lose them.
Mad at myself. But the point is, we exceeded the smog limit, whatever that is now, and free transport. Now, this is a change from what it used to be. It used to be that it was free for people who had a car registration in their name with them, and they could use that in place of a ticket. But now it's free for everybody who gets on the tram.
Well, who cares?
Well, the big issue was that before...
You put it on the show notes, Dave.
I know.
No, actually, the big issue...
No, I didn't.
No, actually, I did. That's why I started talking.
Sorry.
That's my opinion. I'm not being glib. That's my opinion is who cares? Look, I have a monthly tram ticket. I don't care that everyone got to use the tram free that day. I didn't see any increase in passenger load at all. People aren't just going to go, you know what? It's freezing outside. I'm off to Bonarka in rush hour. Yeah, it's free,
No, the problem was before that they would announce that transportation is free on the day when the systems and everything and the filters would say, like, oh, pollution is bad. We need
more political theater.
Yeah, but it's like
zero to
what is the point of giving that information on the day when people are already in their cars? They've already committed to the fact that they're driving to work that day. So they decided to switch last year to okay, we'll look at the prognosis. It's saying that tomorrow smog will be bad, so drivers can find out in the evening that transportation will be free the next day, and okay, in that case maybe I will switch to the bus.
The only good thing about it was it led to some hilarity in the office with us regular card users pretending to grumble that you got a free visit and how do we claim back our money? Ha 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 ha. But at the end of the day, I mean, we've given. I think we're very tram heavy on this show. We know that they're the lifeblood of this city. Every tram development, we're all over it. So I'm glad we discussed this week. But what can you really say about it? We have this stupid, weird rule that if the smog is bad, you get to ride the tram for free.
But as Mike says, you find out about it that morning.
I just don't
the night
care.
Before.
Well, that's what they did this weekend. They actually told you the night before, so you could have planned for it. But it turned out, the wind blew that night and the skies were clear the next day. There was no smog and the transportation was free.
Yeah, it was a strangely smog-free day that day, actually.
to be fair, I don't think anyone's making any big claims for this scheme. It's just a way of highlighting that smog's an issue, isn't it?
Oh, and that the city's doing something about it and wasting money, but it's not actually making a difference.
Actually, on that, right, you were talking about the garden boxes that is going to be spent in the budget. We should do a budget follow-up next week, by the way. And they've started to install them on Jajnita, and it's I was just thinking, I'm no gardener. Isn't it strange to be installing garden boxes in the middle of winter?
Well, what's a garden box?
Well, what they do is a digger comes along, they lift up all where it used to be the little bricks that they put into the pavement here. Yeah. They lift all them up, they dig a hole, they plant soil, they put chippings on top, and they plant saplings for next season. Oh. I was actually thinking it's a great testament to the city, the work they do here. They're always out in all weathers, all conditions, middle of the night, working hard. You wouldn't see that in Ireland, not much. Middle of the night, fixing tram tracks, welding, hard work, in the middle of the hard, cold winter.
Well, actually, yeah, literally just outside earlier this week, they had 2 big diggers and a truck tonner, and they just started digging up the pavement. I couldn't see anything wrong with the pavement. I don't know if they're continuing like this, but they're putting new drains and stuff in all over the city.
We do like to drink while we record, so I'd like to raise a glass to all of those hard-working men and women who go out in the middle of the night and fix shit so we can all get up in the morning. I'm assuming there are some women that work for the city at night, salting roads, doing all that stuff. Well, we get up in the morning and we need to go to work, and they make it possible. Thank you.
One last thing you may have noticed last week in Krakow, and you will notice in the next 3 weeks apparently, some streets in the center of town blocked off for a film production. A film about the life of Josef Pilsudski is being shot here in Krakow, and you'll see the what do you call those vans and the trucks they have, for the
what do you call a van?
For the what?
You mean location catering trucks,
the catering
lighting,
and the wardrobe people and the production people,
motorized vehicles,
etc., etc. And they've also blocked off a lot of streets because they're filming in the usual places in the center of town.
Everything's filmed in Krakow. It's so annoying.
Pilsudski, I was kind of surprised. Not surprised they're making a film about him. Well, actually, yeah, maybe. Yeah, he's kind of low on the list. We've done all the big historical figures, all the Sienkiewicz novels. They're going progressively further down the list.
Please don't tell me we've tempted Jim Carrey back to Krakow to prove us wrong. Please don't tell me Jim is growing a mustache.
Jim Carrey is Joe Pilsudski.
Are there any Polish historical figures that don't have their own movie yet? Who do you think? Who's missing them?
They're coming thick and fast, the old Polish biopics at the moment. Which Englishman's being cast to play Pilsudski?
Mike, can you think of anybody who's missing who doesn't have their own movie yet, or a Sienkiewicz novel that hasn't been filmed 50 times?
Kosciuszko, maybe?
I'm sorry, I'm just really stuck on the mental image of Jim Carrey with a huge stash.
Yeah, big walrus mustache. Yeah. Anyway,
no, they're pretty much out. Yeah, of characters.
You do realise Liverpool playing United in 45 minutes. Can you wrap this up, John? Let's get rolling here.
Just dated this.
Now it's time to hurry up. Yeah, when it's time to go watch the football. Well, that's everything you need to know. In the news this week, thanks for listening. Make sure you share, tell a friend, give us a like, do whatever you do, and we'll talk to you next time on the KrakCast News.